Hello, hello. This is your host Dre, back with another one, coming from you, Augusta, GA, with no power. It is, what is this, like day 4 after Hurricane Helene? But your boy's hanging in here. One of the things I've been wanting to talk about for a little bit, I've been seeing a few stories from like the talking heads like MSNBC and whatnot about Kamala Harris and her struggles with attracting black men to vote for her campaign. Excuse me. It's always funny hearing them talk about things because I feel like it's so obvious, it's so in your face. Somebody like a Savvy Sabs does an amazing breakdown on this. But I mean, those shills, man, they just can't fathom that somebody might not think the sun shines out of her ass. Somebody might have substantive disagreement substantive disagreement with her, and not be from another country, not be a quote unquote bot. You know, some of us may not have a plantation mentality. Some of us may be bold enough to say, hey, look, you don't owe me. You don't owe my goddamn vote. I'll vote for goddamn Mickey Mouse while I vote for some of y'all fuck ass niggas. All right. Bring it back, Drake. Bring it back. All right. So there's a couple things I think that are kind of coming into play for her and her campaign, as for why she's struggling with black men. And according to some of these more recent polls, men in general, I think some of those, if those polls are accurate, and granted, I haven't been online the most in the past, basically since the 25th, 24th, when Hurricane Helene hit my area. So if some things have happened, I may not have seen them because I'm not on the internet that much trying to keep a charge on my phone. So if I miss something obvious, don't nail me to the cross. But for me, I feel like our campaign comes across as very inauthentic and vapid. Every time Kamala gets asked a question of substance, her responses start the same way. Well, you know, I grew up in a middle class household, raised by my mother. Me and my sister were raised by my mother in an apartment above a clinic in Oakland where everybody loved their lawns. And I felt like at the DNC, her including that in her speech, I felt it helped her because it was one of those things. It was very humanizing. When somebody's asking you, hey, how you gonna handle America's geopolitical adversaries? I don't think your upbringing is gonna be substantive in that. When somebody's asking you, how you gonna stimulate the economy and make sure it works for everybody? Talk about your mama, irrelevant in that. And, you know, and so on and so forth. So Kamala feels like the empty suit that she is. Everybody saw her for what she was in 2020. I was about to say is the male Cory Booker, but that would be doing Cory a disservice. She very much is an empty suit. She gets told what her policies are, and I think that's very clear from a lot of the flip-flopping. And she comes across as very opportunistic. It's a lot of that energy to where that ruthless ambition, and it's a turnoff. It's off-putting, and you know, it's kind of, I feel like it's similar to Hillary Clinton, because I felt like Hillary wanted to be president because she wanted to be president, but she at least had ideas for what she wanted to do as president. I remember the interview she did with Ten Walls when they asked her about the day one, what she wanted to start with and tackle, and it was kind of like, I don't know. It's like you running for the office, baby. What you talking about? You don't know. And, we'll do some things. Looking at this, looking at that. But beyond that, I feel like for her, one of the biggest things was policy. And I felt like a lot of people wanted to kind of see what some of her policy would be. She didn't post anything for the longest time, and when she finally did, it looked very familiar. And one of the reasons that it looked familiar was because it was a slight modification of what was there on F Boy Joe's website. So, if you've been unhappy with the course of events for the country in the past 4 years, you feel like this dynamic is not working for you, I feel you have every right to look at a politician like a Kamala and wonder, hey, where are you substantively different than Biden? And how does that benefit me? I feel like it hasn't been working. It hasn't worked out. And she has not articulated that. So for a lot of people, they've come to the conclusion, and whether they're right or wrong, that's a whole nother story. But they've come to the conclusion that if she gets in there, what's this, new boss, just like the old boss, is that the same? I can't remember it, but essentially that's the sentiment. New dude, just like the last dude. And it's one I think is accurate. I don't see her deviating very much from Biden. I really don't. Actually, I kind of see her being a little bit more conservative on certain things. Being more aggressive in certain stances in a geopolitical sense. I could see her driving the Ukraine war longer and longer. I could definitely see her caving into Israel and what's going on over there. So yeah, the places where I feel like there are differences, they're not big and they're not positive. They aren't the things that people vote on. I guess you would say. And one of the things that I feel like comes across and is very starkly clear and startling for some young men is there is a lack of presence to some of the things that young men feel are some of the biggest issues for them. In particular, the job market right now. Unemployment, the average length of unemployment has been ticking up. There is a whole community of men who have been out of work for prolonged periods of time, where I'm talking several months. I myself am one of them. I have been unemployed since the month of May this year. It's 5 months. That is rough. A lot of job seekers are encountering issues where employers are posting fake jobs that they have no intention of ever filling, jobs that they're using to capture people's information and then sell it in a lot of cases. And in the most benign, trying to gauge interest in the depth of a pool for a future wreck that might be months out. And that's the best case scenario. her response is pretty much like, oh yeah, we've got lots of jobs, like we're good. Like, no, we don't. It looks like it on paper. And it's one of those things, I kind of get it. I really do. As an administration, you always want to seem like you're producing jobs. You always want to seem like opportunities increasing for your citizenry. But people live lives, man. People go outside of their four walls and things aren't good. They're losing their jobs. It's getting harder to find a job. And on top of that, inflation is eating a lot of people up. The rates of inflation that we've battled over the last few years has been just crazy for the average American on the average salary. And she's not doing or speaking to those concerns. And I feel like those are the biggest things for young guys. Every week I look in tech, I see where another company has laid off hundreds, if not thousands of people. And, employment is something that I feel is always a big issue, but now more than ever, just due to the changes in the job market, that have made it so much harder for qualified seekers to be seen. Whether you're talking about AI being introduced into that hiring process that may not be very well calibrated and knocks out a lot of qualified people who actually are a 90% plus match for a particular position. So yeah, I can see how a lot of young men would feel alienated and feel like they don't have a place in her America, or that there's no serious concern for them in her vision for America. Even in her speeches, a lot of people don't know this, but her mom was married to her father, Donald Harris. And if I'm recalling correctly, they were married up until Kamala was about age 8. Yet every time she talks, you kind of get the impression like her mom was just completely alone. Like, did this, thugged it out, got it all out the mud and all this. Like, no, she was married for 8 years. Married to your dad for 8 years. And she doesn't mention him much. I know that they had some type of falling out, but even still, it's the only context in which she really talks about him is always very fleeting and it's very sparse. And then finally, she already told us what it is and we listened. This is in particular for black men and black men especially. And I guess you could say anybody in the black community who is kind of on the train of like, hey, we ain't rocking with you. She's told us that she's not going to do any type of policy for black Americans. And if I could find the clip from the NABJ and if I could find the clip from the griot, I'll definitely splice them up and throw them in this video at some point.
You support reparations for black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination and segregation, and now we have segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit black children, black families, black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country, right?
Madam Vice President, black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted black men at your residence.
Yep.
You have engaged black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour. But polling shows that some black men, particularly young black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You gotta earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote. Not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Specifically as it relates to what we need to do, to your point around economic opportunity. Yes, I started way before I was at the top of the ticket, what I called an economic opportunity tour, focused on black men. Understanding that, for example, we have so many entrepreneurs in the community who do not have access to capital, but they've got great ideas, an incredible work ethic, the ambition, the aspiration, the dream, but don't have the relationships necessarily. So my work has included, as vice president, getting billions more dollars into community banks, including working with the big banks to do that, so that we can increase access to capital for our small businesses, for our startups. Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're gonna put the good ideas, they're gonna put the hard work into it. And part of what I also know is that our young black men, just like any group of people, anybody, our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy overall. And when they do better economically, we all do better. Part of my work is about understanding what we need to do in dealing with, for example, the historic inequities that have faced the black community around home ownership, right? I don't have to go through the history with anybody here about what that has meant in terms of redlining, what that has meant in terms of biases and home appraisals, and what the impact it has had on stemming the opportunity to build intergenerational wealth because of those obstacles. So part of the work that I have done and will continue to do is identify, speak truth about those obstacles, and address them. Another example is medical debt. 1 in 4 black families or individuals is more likely to carry medical debt than others. So part of my perspective, and as vice president, part of the work that we have done is to say that we're going to eliminate medical debt from being on your credit score. Because until now, medical debt worked against your credit score, and people know their credit score like your weight, right? You know that number. And the difference between what that number is and what it needs to be is the difference between you being able to get a car loan, a small business loan, or even a leasing on an apartment. And so part of my approach is understanding the obstacles that traditionally and currently exist to allow anyone, including black men, be able to achieve economic wealth. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't think it is sufficient to just only talk about economic policy around reducing unemployment. It is an important marker, and I'm proud of the work that we've done thus far, but it should be a baseline there, everybody's working. The point is, do people have an opportunity to build wealth? If that's what they choose to do, if that's what they want to do. And a lot of my perspective as we go forward is just that. I believe that there are a lot of opportunities that are available to the American people if we see people and understand what they want for themselves and their families and then meet them where they are.
Madam Vice President, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the war in Gaza.
It's one of those things where, and she co-signed this Steve Harvey statement, where he essentially said, "Well, come on, guys, people, we gotta come out here and vote for Kamala. You know, y'all talking about reparations and what you gonna do? We hold up now. America too racist for to do anything just for us. We just gotta come out here and vote. This is our duty now. We gotta come out here and vote and support her. Of course, I'm not gonna ask her no hard questions. I'm here to throw the alley-oop. America too racist for you to do anything just for black folk now." I feel like a lot of black Americans have said, "Oh, okay, cool, I got you. What side? How'd it go? Oh, all right, bet. All right, bet." And I feel like you're seeing that. Black Americans are looking around, and they're seeing an administration whose policies don't really benefit them. They're seeing an administration who is doing things for other groups of people. In my opinion, an administration that has been highly insulting to black people. Black people have been demanding a hate crime bill. They did it for Asians. Black people have been asking for reparations and reparative justice for the harms of slavery, Jim Crow, and systemic racism. And they imported illegals and gave them money. So I feel like a lot of black people have taken notice of this. And they might not be on the type of time I'm on, but I do view a lot of those things as Democrats thumbing their nose at black people. And I know for myself, I ain't voting for him. I gave her a chance with the policy to kind of see what she was about and see if she really delineated or separated herself in any type of way. And I don't see it. And I feel like a lot of other black Americans are seeing the same. To where if America is too racist for you to do anything to benefit me, it's not on me to get you elected. And that's where I feel the heart of her trouble with black men in particular is coming from. There's a sense of there's a segment of black women as well that share some of that. They're not quite as large as the men. But as black Americans, as American descendants of slaves, I feel it is wicked work to approach us, say, I'm not going to do anything for you, but vote for me. Nah, that's not how you go to Asians. That's not how you go to Hispanics. That's not how you go to the whites. So you can keep your Megan Thee Stallion shaking her ass on stage and all that other stuff. Like, if you're not talking anything of substance, if you're not talking any type of policy that's going to improve my community, improve my life, then I feel like you've lost me. And I feel like that's at the core of why she's having the problems that she's having. You can only say F you to so many people in electoral politics before you end up on the losing side. And I feel the Democrats, and in particular her campaign, has said F you to too many people. With what's going on over in Gaza, there are a lot of Muslims that's upset. How they've done a lot of things. There's a lot of black guys who's upset. There's a lot of folks who's upset at Democrats, honestly. A lot to go around. And this is one of the things where I feel like, in terms of Black Americans, we are actually kind of starting to navigate through. I feel this is a sign that we're starting to navigate through. What do you do? How do you break benign neglect? When the two parties agree, and you feel, when you lock yourself into a two-party duopoly of red v blue, especially when you pledge fealty to one side, how do you break that? How do you get around that? And for me, I believe, honestly and truthfully, the answer isn't really voting for the other side. I feel you have to go third party. I feel that's the most substantive and impactful place we can throw our vote. That's me personally, because I know I've said this one thing before, that third parties don't have to win to win, and I've been thinking about that statement more and more, and I want to amend that statement, because I do think in the short term, a third party, if they saw where the duopoly, if they saw where a third party was getting a lot of vote share, would start trying to adopt some policy from them. Ultimately, what I think would happen, because of the influence of corporations, as I kind of played the long game on it, I've often said Republicrats to refer to the duopoly. I really do think you would get a Republicrat party. People like Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris. Think about that. These people, they agree on a whole hell of a lot. And Dick Cheney was one of the most despised politicians in America during the Bush administration. One of the most despised Republicans. That dude, yeah, he on board with our liberal agenda. Okay. I don't know if I brag about that one, but all right. I think you're really telling on yourself, because at the end of the day, it's really showing. It's not that there's no difference between these parties. I think that is a bit of hyperbole. The issue is there isn't enough difference between these two parties. And the only way you break that is by introducing a new player into the game. And I really see it would be one of those things to where you would have a soul searching moment, to where a lot of those Democrats that are probably a little bit like myself, that favor a lot of policy like New Deal style policy and whatnot, would have to really question, is this the vehicle for me to get those policies? And if they jump ship to like a Green Party per se, I think you get a point to where they start registering. And once they start registering, it's a scale that starts to tip to where, oh dang, there's a lot of greens in my local government, or libertarians in my local government. And I'm starting to see a few state governors and councilmen and state congressmen and senators, maybe even a senator or a congressional representative gets in there, and but that's a whole nother video. That's a whole nother thing. I'm going down a rabbit hole. Sorry, forgive me. I'm delirious from all this heat. But did I hit it on the head? I ultimately think the fact that she's come out and she stood on business, that she ain't doing nothing for black people, has turned off a lot of black men voters. And yeah, I think it's just that simple. You ain't doing that for me, I ain't doing a damn thing for you. Do you agree with the points that I made? Do you not? Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Peace. Hope you have a great one, and be safe.